Millions of them. The sound alone was disturbing. A constant rustling, clicking noise. Like static on a radio, but organic, alive. Max noticed something weird. In the middle of this ant-covered area, there was a small clearing, maybe 10 feet across. And in that clearing, a single red crab sat completely still, not moving, just sitting there, surrounded on all sides by ants. But the ants weren't attacking it. Max watched for 20 minutes. The crab didn't move. The ants walked around it, but never touched it. He came back the next day. Same thing. The crab was still there, still alive, still surrounded. On the third day, the crab was gone. Max never figured out what happened. Did the crab finally move and get attacked? Did it die of dehydration? Or did something else happen? He told me this story when I interviewed him last year for research, and he said something that stuck with me. He said watching that crab surrounded by enemies but somehow surviving in that tiny pocket of safety, that image haunted him. Because he knew that crab represented every remaining red crab on the island. Isolated, surrounded, running out of time. That story is why what happened next matters so much. So researchers from Parks Australia, La Trobe University, and Monash University came together and designed something unprecedented. They called it an island-wide aerial baiting program. The plan was to cover the entire island, or at least every area where crazy ants had established super colonies, with poison bait. And they had to do it all at once. Hit the ants everywhere simultaneously so they couldn't escape or recover. The bait they chose contained a substance called fipronil. Now, fipronil is an insecticide that targets the nervous system of insects. It's slow-acting, which is exactly what they needed. When an ant eats the bait, it doesn't die immediately. Instead, it goes back to the nest and shares the food with other ants. Worker ants feed it to the larvae. They feed it to the queen. The poison spreads through the entire colony before the ants even realize they're dying. Think of it like a zombie virus in a horror movie. One person gets infected, but they don't know it yet. They go home, they hug their family, they share a meal. By the time the first person shows symptoms, everyone's already infected. That's how fipronil works. It's devastatingly effective because the ants themselves become the weapon against their own colony.
But deploying this across an entire island? That's insanely complicated.
Christmas Island is about 52 square miles of rugged terrain. Most of it is covered in dense rainforest with steep cliffs, deep ravines, and areas so thick with vegetation that you can barely walk through them. They couldn't just drive around and spread the bait by hand. They needed helicopters. In December 2017, the operation began. Helicopters loaded with bait flew precise grid patterns over the island, dropping tiny pellets of poison across thousands of acres. Each pellet was about the size of a grain of rice, specially formulated to attract ants. The pilots had to fly low and slow to ensure even coverage, navigating through difficult terrain in tropical heat. Over the course of several days, they dropped 27 million individual bait pellets across the island, and then they waited. Within 48 hours, the first signs appeared. Workers monitoring ant super colonies started noticing changes. The ants were moving slower. Their frantic, erratic movements became sluggish. Within 72 hours, entire super colonies went silent. Areas that had been teeming with millions of ants were suddenly empty, just dead ants everywhere. Carpets of them covering the forest floor. The silence was eerie. One researcher described it as the island.
The silence was eerie. The island holding its breath.
For years, the background noise of Christmas Island had been the constant movement of ants, that rustling, clicking sound, and suddenly it was gone. Remember those scale insects the ants were farming? With their protectors gone, you'd think they'd die off too, right? That's what the scientists hoped. But nature doesn't always work that way. In some areas, the scale insects did decline. Without ants to protect them, predators moved in and started eating them. But in other areas, the damage was already done. The scale insects had become so numerous that even without ant protection, they continued devastating the trees. The forest canopy in those areas kept dying. And then there were the crabs. With the ants gone, the red crabs started coming back. Slowly at first. Scientists would spot 1 or 2 crabs in areas that had been dead zones for years. Then 10, then 100. The crabs emerged from wherever they'd been hiding, from the small pockets of forest where the ants hadn't reached. They started spreading out, reclaiming their territory. But not all the crabs came back to a paradise. In areas where the scale insects had killed large sections of forest, the crabs found a changed landscape. Less canopy meant more sunlight reaching the forest floor. That meant higher temperatures and lower humidity. Red crabs need moist, cool environments to survive. Too much direct sunlight and they dry out and die. So while some areas saw crab populations rebound quickly, other areas remained largely empty. The habitat had been too damaged. And there was another unexpected consequence. With millions of dead ants covering the forest floor, something had to clean them up. Scavengers moved in. Other insects, mites, spiders, and even some birds started feeding on the dead ant bodies. This created temporary population booms in these scavenger species. More food meant more breeding, which meant more of these creatures than the ecosystem was used to supporting. Some of these scavenger species became problems themselves. There were reports of certain beetle populations exploding, and these beetles started competing with the crabs for food. Nobody had predicted this. You remove one invasive species and the ecosystem doesn't just snap back to normal. It shifts. New balances form. New competitions arise. The scientists also had to deal with public criticism. Environmental groups raised concerns about the fipronil. Yes, it was designed to target insects, but what about the birds that ate those insects? What about the crabs that might consume the poisoned ants? What about the impact on the soil, on the water systems, on the entire food web? The researchers had done extensive testing before the operation. They'd studied fipronil's breakdown rate in tropical environments. They'd modeled how it would move through the food chain. They'd concluded the risks were acceptable compared to the certainty of losing the entire ecosystem to the crazy ants. But testing in a lab and deploying it across an entire island are two very different things. In the months following the baiting, monitoring teams fanned out across Christmas Island. They set up camera traps, counting stations, and sample plots. They tracked crab numbers, ant numbers, forest health, scale insect populations, and dozens of other variables. What they found was both encouraging and sobering. In areas where the baiting had been most successful, crab populations rebounded by as much as 70% within 2 years. The forest floor came alive again. Leaf litter started getting processed properly. Seeds began germinating. Native plants returned. The ecosystem showed signs of healing, but the ants weren't completely gone. And what the scientists discovered about the survivors changed everything about how they understood invasive species.
I'll tell you what they found in just a moment. But first, you need to understand why it matters.
Yellow crazy ants are incredibly resilient. Some colonies survived either because they were in areas the helicopters couldn't reach effectively, or because the queens were deep enough underground that not enough poison reached them. These surviving colonies began rebuilding, slowly but surely. By 2019, researchers detected new ant activity in several locations. The invasion wasn't over. This led to follow-up baiting operations in 2018, 2019, and 2020. Each time, helicopters returned to target the areas where ants had recovered. Each time, they dropped more bait, and each time, they knocked the ant populations back down. But complete eradication proved impossible. The real turning point came in late 2020 when scientists made a breakthrough discovery. They figured out that the surviving ant colonies weren't just random survivors. They were specifically colonies that had developed behavioral adaptations. These ants had learned or evolved to avoid the bait. Some colonies changed their foraging patterns, sending out scouts that would test food before bringing it back. If the scouts didn't return, the colony wouldn't touch that food source. Other colonies shifted their diet, relying more heavily on the honeydew from scale insects.